Welcome to Detective Reddington's office. Take a seat and listen to this story. It will be interesting. I always thought that trust was the foundation of any strong marriage. For 12 years, Sarah and I had built what I believed was an unshakable bond. We had a comfortable home in the suburbs, 2 kids, and a lifestyle that seemed perfect to anyone on the outside. But then things started to change. Slowly. So subtly at first that I didn't even notice. Until I did. It all began with the damn phone. Sarah was never without it. At first I chalked it up to work. She had started a new job a few months ago, working closely with her boss, Mark. Late-night texts, emails, and urgent calls from him became the new normal. I didn't question it. Why would I? She never left it at home, never set it down, not even when we were watching TV. The phone was glued to her hand, and I didn't have the password. That was the first red flag, wasn't it? I mean, who doesn't share their phone password with their spouse after 12 years of marriage? Maybe I was naive, or maybe I just trusted her too much. Whatever it was starting to gnaw at me. Every time her phone buzzed in the middle of the night, I felt it. A twinge of doubt, a gut feeling I couldn't shake. But I pushed it down, told myself I was just being paranoid. Then came the subtle changes in her behavior. She started dressing differently, more provocatively. I remember the first time I saw her in a new dress, tight and a little too revealing for just a workday. "It's just for a business dinner," she said. "Mark's taking a few clients out, and I need to look professional." But something felt off. She wasn't dressing for work. She was dressing for someone else. I just didn't know who yet. And then there were the nights she came home late. "Work ran over," she'd say, avoiding eye contact as she hurried past me, still glued to that damn phone. I'd sit there, wondering what happened to us. We used to talk about everything: work, the kids, our future. Now, silence, except for the buzzing of her phone. I didn't confront her right away. Part of me didn't want to believe that anything was wrong. Maybe she really was working late, and maybe the new clothes were just for confidence. But that doubt kept creeping in. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. I knew I had to find out what was going on. But how do you start investigating your own wife? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So one night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at her phone on the coffee table. It was locked, of course, but that didn't stop me from trying to guess the password. After a few failed attempts, I gave up. Chasing shadows, that's what this felt like. But I couldn't help myself. I needed to know. The next day, I decided to keep my eyes open, to watch for any more signs. I was done brushing this under the rug. Something was going on, and I was going to find out what. But I had no idea that my suspicions would lead me down a path that would change everything. After that first night of staring at her phone like a fool, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her until I had something solid. If I accused her without proof, it would only blow up in my face. And if I was wrong, well, I'd be the paranoid hole who didn't trust his wife. So I waited, watched, collected evidence in my head like some kind of amateur detective. And the signs kept coming. Sarah started working out more. Nothing wrong with that, except she was already in great shape. But now it was as if she was training for a triathlon. New gym membership, personal trainer, early mornings at the gym before work and late evenings too. I'd ask her about it, and she'd shrug it off. Just trying to stay fit. You know? Yeah, I knew. But who was she staying fit for? Her behavior around me had changed too. She was distant, distracted. Sometimes, she'd sit across from me at the dinner table, barely looking up from her phone. It was like I wasn't even there. And the intimacy? Don't even get me started. We went from a healthy sex life to, well, almost nothing. She always had an excuse. Too tired, too stressed, too busy. I tried to understand, but it felt like we were living separate lives. One night, I decided to follow her. Yeah, I know how that sounds. Like some creepy stalker, tailing his own wife. But I was desperate. I needed to know if my gut was right or if I was just losing my mind. She said she had a business dinner with Mark and a few clients. The same excuse as before. I pretended not to care, but as soon as she left the house, I grabbed my keys and followed her. She drove across town to a fancy restaurant. One of those places we used to go to on anniversaries or special occasions. I parked down the street and watched as she walked inside, her dress clinging to her body in a way that made my stomach churn. She was meeting someone, but who? I waited outside for what felt like hours. When she finally emerged, she wasn't alone. Mark was with her and they were laughing, standing a little too close. My blood boiled. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But I didn't do anything. I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. When she got home later that night, I didn't say a word. Just watched her as she kicked off her shoes and slipped into bed next to me like nothing had happened. But something had. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I found out exactly what. I couldn't stop thinking about that night outside the restaurant. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Laughing, flirting, standing too close. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she really cheating on me? Or was I just losing it? Maybe they were just friends. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew the truth. I could feel it. I decided to take things a step further. I wasn't proud of it, but I installed a tracking app on her phone. It was easy enough to do when she wasn't paying attention. I didn't have her password, but the app gave me just enough access to see where she was going. I needed to know if she was lying about where she was spending her time. The first few days didn't show much. She went to work, the gym, the grocery store. Everything seemed normal. But then, one evening, she told me she was working late. Another client meeting with Mark. I checked the app. She wasn't at work. She was at some apartment complex across town. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the screen. Who the hell was she meeting at an apartment? I felt sick, but I couldn't stop now. I needed to know what was going on. I grabbed my jacket and keys, and without thinking twice, I drove to the address on the app. When I got there, I parked down the street and watched. Her car was there, parked in the lot. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. Then, finally, I saw her walk out of the building, followed by Mark. They were close, too close. He touched her arm, and she didn't pull away. I felt a rage building inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had seen enough. This was no longer just suspicion. It was real. Sarah was cheating on me, and now I had proof. But what was I going to do about it? Couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the scene outside that apartment flashed before me. Mark's hand on her shoulder, her smile. What next? That question gnawed at me. The anger was there, burning inside, but I couldn't make any rash moves. I knew if I acted impulsively, I'd ruin everything. And I wanted more. I wanted the full truth. The next morning, Sarah behaved as if nothing had happened. She got up, made coffee, and went to the gym just like she always did. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, thinking about how much our lives had changed over the past few months. Everything we had felt like a distant memory. After that night with the tracking app, I knew one thing. I couldn't sit still any longer. I had to talk to her. But how? How do you bring this up without blowing up your entire marriage? I decided not to go in guns blazing. A softer approach would be better. That evening, after the kids went to bed, I decided it was time to start the conversation. Sarah was on the couch with her phone, scrolling through her social media, as usual. Sarah, I began softly. She glanced up at me but quickly returned her focus to the phone. We haven't really talked about us in a while. She nodded but didn't say anything. You've been spending a lot of time with Mark lately? I continued, trying to keep my voice level. It was hard. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but I held it back. She smiled, though it was small and didn't reach her eyes. We just work together, John. You know that. I know, I said, leaning forward slightly. But it feels like there's more to it. She paused for a few seconds, her fingers still on her phone screen. She didn't respond right away, and in that moment I realized, if she lied to me now, it would be the end of us. What exactly are you implying? She finally asked, still not meeting my gaze. That there seems to be more between you two than just work, I said carefully, but inside, I was burning. "You've been spending a lot of time with him. Are you jealous?" She laughed, but it wasn't the laugh I knew. It was nervous, defensive. And that's when I realized now wasn't the time for confrontation. Not yet. I was close, but not ready. "Maybe," I shrugged, deciding to ease off. "Just wanted to talk about it." She nodded, and her attention returned to her phone. I decided I needed to play this differently. A direct confrontation wasn't going to work right now, so I started formulating another plan. Of course, that conversation didn't make me feel any better. I knew Sarah was hiding something, but instead of being angry at her, I decided to dig deeper. There were still moments when she left her phone unattended, but they were rare. I couldn't focus at work anymore. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race. What if it's some kind of clue? I think. But it was always mundane texts or work calls. I was becoming paranoid. The next evening, when she left for the gym, I decided to make my move. Her laptop was sitting on the living room table, and I figured maybe it wasn't as protected as her phone. I opened the lid. Password. "Damn it," I muttered, staring at the screen. It seemed like every step I tried to take was blocked. But then I remembered another possibility. We had a shared iPad that she often used for online shopping or watching movies. I grabbed it and sat down on the couch to check it out. When I opened the browser, I saw a few normal sites in the history. Nothing too out of the ordinary: shopping, social media, YouTube videos. But then I stumbled upon something that stopped me cold. A site called FansHub. I'd never heard of it before, but it looked suspicious. When I clicked on the link, I was hit like a freight train. It was a camgirl site, and you know what? Sarah had a profile on there. Her photo was right there, nothing too explicit, but with that same smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. She was posing with a cup of coffee, and there were tons of comments below the photo. Her profile was popular. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't physical cheating, but it was something much more than I could handle. What now? I didn't know how to process this. But one thing was clear: everything had changed. For the first time in my life, I didn't know how to react. Sure, Sarah wasn't cheating on me physically. She wasn't in bed with Mark. But what was this? Camgirling. She was showing herself to other men online. She was flaunting her body to strangers for money. Could this be considered cheating? Did I have a right to be angry? I sat on the couch, leaning back with my head against the cushion, staring at the ceiling. What did this mean for our marriage? She had never mentioned anything about this, never even hinted that she liked showing herself off. And now I had seen it with my own eyes. She was doing this behind my back. I felt anger boiling inside me, but something else was fighting it. Despair. Why was she doing this? Was I not giving her enough attention? Was she unhappy with her life, our marriage? These questions echoed in my head like a drumbeat, and I couldn't find the answers. If this had been another man, I would have known what to do. Divorce, obviously. But now, things were much more complicated. That evening, when Sarah came home from the gym, I tried to act normal. She was just the same as always, cheerful, smiling. She sat next to me on the couch and started talking about her day like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. I watched her, thinking about those photos, those comments on her profile. Every word felt loaded with double meaning. Every move seemed fake. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, busy," she said, smiling. "You know how it is." Yeah, I knew. And now I knew more than I ever wanted to. But what was I supposed to do with this information? I couldn't just blow up our marriage over something that wasn't even physical. But it was still a lie. She was hiding something from me, and that destroyed my trust in her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, listening to her calm breathing, thinking about what I had discovered. Maybe I should just talk to her? But what would I say? "Hey, I know you're a camgirl." How do you even start that conversation? And was I ready to hear her answer? The next day, I woke up with the same thoughts. Sarah acted as if nothing had changed. Maybe for her, this was normal. She wasn't physically cheating on me, but morally, damn, it felt like betrayal. She was hiding something from me, and that alone was serious. But how could I bring it up? How do you start this conversation? At work, I couldn't think about anything else. My colleagues noticed I was distracted, but no one dared to ask what was wrong. Maybe they thought I was just tired or overwhelmed with work. But that was far from the truth. I decided to gather more information before confronting her. Maybe I misunderstood something? Maybe she didn't think it was a big deal? But why was she hiding it from me then? That evening, I tried to talk to her again. We sat at the dinner table. The kids went to their rooms after eating, and I figured this was my chance. Sarah, I began, putting down my fork. She looked at me across the table. Yeah, John? I've been feeling like something's changed between us lately. You've changed. She frowned but kept her voice calm. What do you mean? I haven't noticed anything like that. I could have told her everything. I could have laid out all my cards right then and there. But I didn't. Something held me back. Maybe fear. Maybe not knowing how she would react. I just looked at her and swallowed the words again. It's just, we haven't had a normal conversation in a long time, I finally said, trying to keep my cool. I know, she said, smiling slightly. We've both been busy. Work, kids. That's normal, right? No, it wasn't normal. But I couldn't say that. I nodded, and we continued eating in silence. A silence filled with unspoken words and hidden secrets. The next few days passed, and my suspicions only grew. I felt more and more isolated in my own home. The thought of doing nothing tortured me. I knew I couldn't just sit still. I had to figure out what exactly Sarah was hiding. I knew she would never leave her phone unattended. It was her personal fortress, inaccessible to me. But I couldn't let that stop me. I needed to find other ways to get the information. I decided to check her laptop again. This time, I took things more seriously. I installed software that could record her activity when she used the computer. I knew it was wrong, but I had already crossed the line. Desperation was driving me forward, and I couldn't wait any longer. A few days later, I checked the results. She regularly visited the same site, and every time it was late at night when I was already asleep. She spent hours interacting with strangers. This was like a second job for her. But why hadn't she told me about it? My thoughts raced ahead. Maybe this was her way of seeking attention she wasn't getting from me? Maybe she just wanted to feel desired again? But even if that were true, why did she have to do it behind my back? Every new fact I uncovered only made the situation more confusing. Now, I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. Days dragged on like an eternity. I had become obsessed with the situation. Every little detail, every new piece of evidence I uncovered, only pulled me deeper into this chaos. I was no longer myself. Constant thoughts about Sarah and what she was doing behind my back had turned into a painful paranoia. One evening, when the kids were at their grandmother's, I decided it was time to act. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I could no longer tolerate this farce. I felt like our life was just a performance, and it was time to take off the masks. Sarah, we need to talk. My voice was calm, though a storm was brewing inside me. She looked at me, a little surprised, but not afraid. That irritated me even more. How could she be so calm, knowing that I knew? What do you want to talk about? She asked, taking a sip from her cup. Her indifference felt like a slap in the face. About you, about us, and about what you're doing behind my back, I said, trying to keep the situation under control. But inside, I was boiling. She set the cup down and crossed her arms. Her gaze was cold and cautious. What are you talking about, John? This was the moment of truth. I could lay all my cards on the table. I could accuse her right now with the evidence in hand. But something held me back. Maybe it was the desire to hear her side, her explanation, before tearing down everything we had built over the years. I know about your online activities, I said, looking her straight in the eye. My back was straight and I wasn't about to back down. She froze for a few seconds, and I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. She knew what I was talking about, but her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't panic or deny it. So you found out, she said calmly, leaning back in her chair. That calmness threw me off. I expected excuses, tears, but instead, There was cold confidence. You found out? Damn it, Sarah. You're saying this like it's no big deal. I felt the anger boiling up inside me. She sighed. It's not what you think. It's not cheating. Not cheating? You're showing yourself to strangers on camera, making money off it, and doing it behind my back. How is that not cheating? It's just work, John, she replied, looking me straight in the eye. Nothing more. There's no physical relationship, so it's not cheating. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Her words were so confident that I began to doubt myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe it really was just work, and I was overreacting. You're doing this without my knowledge, I said quietly, feeling my anger slowly turning into disappointment. That's still a betrayal. I know you feel betrayed, she said, her voice softening. But it's not what you think. I never meant to hurt you. It's just a way for me to feel attractive again. I was silent, staring at her. The words were stuck in my throat. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't physically cheating, but morally, it hurt just the same. After that conversation, I was utterly devastated. Sarah admitted she was camgirling but refused to acknowledge it as cheating. She talked about it as if it was some innocent thing, and while I tried to keep my sanity, I couldn't reconcile with her explanation. I sat in my office, thinking about what had happened. I had two options: accept it and try to move on, or put an end to our marriage. But how do you do that? I loved her. How can you so easily break off 12 years of marriage over something that wasn't even physical cheating? My ego was crushed. I felt humiliated. What she was doing seemed worse than physical cheating. She was selling her image to other men, and it was happening without me knowing. It was the same lie, and it hurt me. I thought about the kids. How would this affect them if we got divorced? I never wanted them to grow up in a broken home. But could I live with this lie? That night, I decided not to rush into a decision. I needed to gather my thoughts and figure out what I truly wanted. But something inside me told me that our life would never be the same again. The next few days were filled with tension. I tried to act like everything was normal, but something inside me had changed. My trust in Sarah was shattered. Every time I saw her with her phone or laptop, I felt the anger boiling up inside me. I could no longer look at her the same way. One evening, when the kids were in their rooms, I decided to find out more. I connected to the software I had installed on her laptop to check what she was doing. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. What I saw completely changed my perspective. Sarah was online, but she wasn't just sitting in front of the camera, talking. She was fulfilling requests from viewers. I couldn't believe my eyes. This was too much. She wasn't just hiding this from me. She was actively participating in something far beyond just showing herself. That was the moment I knew I couldn't take it anymore. This was too much. After seeing what I saw that night on her laptop, I had no more doubts. Sarah had crossed a line. My trust was completely destroyed, and our closeness crushed. This wasn't just some small thing to boost her self-esteem. She had lied to me every day, and I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, when the kids went to school, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, waiting for her to come downstairs. My decision was made: divorce. I couldn't continue living with someone who so easily gave a part of herself to others, behind my back. I felt deceived and humiliated. She came downstairs, as always, with a cheerful smile, but this time I couldn't return it. I no longer saw the woman I once loved. "John, did you not sleep well?" she asked, sitting across from me. I paused for a moment, looking into her eyes. It was hard to say it, but even harder to keep living in this lie. "We need to talk," I finally said, feeling my resolve harden with every word. She put her phone down and frowned. "What happened?" "I know everything, Sarah. I know about your online activities, the cameras, everything you're doing behind my back." My words were cold and precise, like a knife's edge. She was silent for a few seconds, staring at me. Her face paled, and I knew she couldn't deny it any longer. She knew she was caught. "It's not what you think," she began to justify herself. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had heard these excuses before. "It doesn't matter, Sarah." I raised my hand to stop her. "We're done. I can't live with this anymore. Her eyes filled with tears. John, please, it wasn't real. It's just work. It, it's not cheating. Not cheating. I could barely contain my anger. You've been showing your body to hundreds of men for money. You've been lying to me every day. How is that not cheating? Her tears streamed down her face. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to feel attractive again. You wanted attention? I stood up sharply. You got it. From everyone except me. And now we're done. She was silent, and I stood, breathing heavily. The words stuck in my throat, but I couldn't stop. I'm filing for divorce, I added quietly finally. I spent the next week planning every step like I was going to war. Sarah tried to talk to me, begged for a second chance, said everything would change if I just let her explain. But for me, it was clear. The trust was gone forever. All that remained was cold formality. I reached out to a lawyer who advised me to be cautious. Since we had kids and shared assets, he suggested I act carefully, avoiding any unnecessary drama. But I couldn't keep calm like before. I decided to act radically. When the kids were at school and Sarah went to work, I prepared my attack. I downloaded all the evidence from her Fans Hub profile, gathered the recordings from the hidden software on her computer. Every detail was going to be a weapon against her. That same day, I filed for divorce. But my revenge was only in its early stages. I didn't just want to leave her. I wanted everyone to know who she had become behind my back. The next day, I did something that I might later call cruelty. I gathered all the evidence and anonymously sent it to Mark. I knew she worked closely with him, and I suspected there might have been more between them than just work. Even if that wasn't true, I wanted him to see her true face. Mark received my package of evidence the next day. I didn't know how he would react, but soon I realized my trap had worked. Sarah came home from work, looking upset and scared. I knew something had happened. What's wrong? I asked, trying to keep my face emotionless. Mark found out everything, she said quietly, sitting down in a chair. He doesn't want to work with me anymore. I barely held back a smile. This was the first step. But it wasn't enough for me. And what are you going to do? I asked, already knowing the answer. I don't know. She looked at me, her eyes full of tears. I've lost everything. I stayed silent. This was exactly what I wanted. Her life was starting to fall apart, just like mine had when I first learned the truth. But this was just the beginning. I finished filing the divorce papers that same week. She begged me to stay, pleaded for one more chance. But there were no more chances. I ended it with cold determination. The divorce was inevitable. The judge ruled in my favor, and within a few months, I was a free man. We divided the assets, settled the issues with the kids, and I no longer had anything to do with Sarah. She lost not only me but her job as well. Her Fans Hub profile was deleted. She tried to start a new life, but everyone who knew her already knew about her past. Did I feel relief? Yes, but there was also bitterness. Our history, our love, everything was destroyed by lies. Maybe it wasn't physical cheating, but the moral betrayal was worse. I would never be able to look at her the same way. But now I was free. I could start over. And that was the only thought that kept me going. Sometimes revenge doesn't bring full satisfaction. But that doesn't mean it wasn't necessary.